Hello everyone, welcome back to Omegon 2 Electric Boogaloo. I'm going to start by saying the following. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but I've been collecting sources on Discord server since the 21st of March. I wanted to see whether or not this particular Lolsuit that we're going to cover today would have had any interest long term, but the trial only lasted nearly 2 weeks. Yeah, and I'll be honest, it shouldn't have gone this long. The trial concerns Gwyneth Paltrow, one of the biggest science deniers I've ever come across. Gwyneth Paltrow, in her own right, is a joke. Recently, in an exhibition of stupid people, I talked about rectal ozone therapy, something which she believes in. She believes it helps you, invigorates you, anti-aging in fact, helps the heart, repairs the lungs, because as is well known, since she talks out of her asshole, she breathes out of it as well. And this makes perfect sense when you consider that she spends an inordinate amount of time when she eventually does eat, shoveling vast amounts of vegetables into her gob, trying desperately to claw back some of those calories that she really should be eating on a regular basis. The lawsuit in question concerns a ski collision that left a doctor injured, severely no less. Terry Sanderson, 76 years old, was the retired optometrist who was injured in the process. Gwyneth Paltrow had claimed that she was injured by another skier at the time. This happened in Park City, Utah, with Terry Sanderson believing that the crash into him was with such force that he was left with permanent traumatic brain injury, 4 broken ribs, pain, suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, emotional damage, and disfigurement. He had wanted $3.1 million in damages. This was since lowered to $300,000, with her seeking $1 in damages and for her legal fees to be covered. That is all the backstory you need for this video. What I'm going to do is highlight something from each individual day of the trial, maybe a clip here or there, and then go to the verdict so we can have a good chuckle at this. During opening statements, Gwyneth Paltrow's lawyer, Steve Owens, told the jury his client had just begun descending the slope when a pair of skis appeared between hers and a man collided with her back. He also said that Colonel Sanders, Terry Sanderson that is, who suffers from vision and hearing loss as a result of a previous stroke, may not have seen his client before he collided with her, and that his client initially suspected she was being assaulted and was so shaken she chose not to ski for the rest of the day, as a reason for why she did not stick around after the incident to make sure that Sanderson was okay. Colonel Sanderson's lawyer, Lawrence Buehler, B-U-H-L-E-R, said that Gwyneth Paltrow showed conscious disregard for other people on the mountain when she crashed into his client, causing the injuries. Distracted skiers cause crashes. She knew that skiing that way, blindly skiing down a mountain while looking up and to the side, was reckless. She knew that continuing to ski that way, she would crash into somebody below her. Turns out with this trial, it all goes back to an original claim in 2019. That filing claimed that the ski instructor who had been training Gwyneth Paltrow saw Mr. Sanderson injured, but also made no attempt to help him. The first witness took the stand on the first day of the trial, Craig Ramone, who witnessed the collision between Gwyneth Paltrow and Mr. Sanderson, and told the jury that Mr. Sanderson was an advanced to expert skier. He claimed that he was right behind Mr. Sanderson when the accident unfolded, and testified that during the 6 ski trips with Mr. Sanderson, he only saw him trip when he and Miss Paltrow crashed into each other. With Craig also saying, "We were skiing down the run and I heard this scream and looked over, and then I see this skier just slam into the back of Terry. Very hard, very hard. He falls face down and Gwyneth is on top of him and then bounces off around, slides to the right 5 or 10 feet. With Mr. Sanderson remaining unconscious for a few minutes, according to Craig Ramone. Her ski instructor, Gwyneth that is, came over, started being abusive, left Terry unconscious on the floor, and both left the scene without making sure that he was okay. After which, when he did regain consciousness, Terry Sanderson was afraid. The defense's response to that was to call into question Mr. Ramone's color blindness. As he suffers from it, it is possible he did not see things as they unfolded, and then went on to question the witness testimony by using some images here to point out where the accident happened, where Mr. Ramone was, basically trying to make sure that everything was where they said it was. On to day 2. Now, it was around day 2 that Gwyneth Paltrow started trending. Well, Gwyneth Paltrow's ski crash case trended. This is where you will find many of the videos of Gwyneth Paltrow talking about her diet. They are of no interest in this video, but I will link the exhibition of stupid people down below in the pinned comment if you're interested in that. On day 2, Terry Sanderson's attorneys were expected to call 4 witnesses. One, a radiologist called Wendell Gibby, a neuropsychologist called Sam Goldstein, and they left the possibility open that one could be Gwyneth Paltrow herself, depending on when the others expected to testify arrived in Park City. While cross-examining Wendell Gibby, the radiologist, lawyers for Gwyneth Paltrow went through Jenny Sanderson, Terry Sanderson's daughter's, statements, testimony about his relationship with his family after the accident, indicating that it was strained because of what he'd gone through. She described her father as a domineering and easily frustrated man. According to that same testimony, Jenny said she did not feel loved or nurtured by her father. Elsewhere, she'd also said that he was verbally abusive towards her and her mother, and that he'd always been frustrated and quick to anger, and that at that point, she had not had a working relationship with her father for about 13 years. Wendell Gibby could not recall all details of the original deposition, but did concede he was aware of the rather fractured relationship between the father and daughter. Wendell Gibby, though, the reason for being on the stand in the first place, had previously alleged that Terry Sanderson's relationship with his family only deteriorated after the crash. There were also complaints about the fact that the cameras were mostly on Gwyneth Paltrow when this was considered, that's haram to have cameras on Gwyneth Paltrow. Before we go to day 3, I just want to highlight that on the trending tag for this day, an old TMZ article had been shared about, titled Gwyneth Paltrow, Arsehole Driver of the Year. Just going to put it out there. Whether it has any bearing on this trial or not, I'm not entirely sure. Day 3 of the trending tag Gwyneth Paltrow's ski crash case was still mostly made up of people pointing out, because it was on day 2 as well, I just didn't show you, that Gwyneth Paltrow really does have an entitled resting bitch face. Everything is beneath her look. Regardless of whether or not she's right or wrong, that was what people focused on. On day 3, the 2 legal teams had argued over whether Gwyneth Paltrow's lawyer is allowed to grill Sanderson's daughter Polly about another daughter, Jenny, who we spoke of on day 2, who refused to appear in this trial. Terry Sanderson's lawyer said the line of questioning amounts to an unnecessary attack on his character, which is only happening because Gwyneth Paltrow is worried about the way this case is going. However, it should be noted, 2 daughters of Terry Sanderson are expected at this point to testify about the lasting effects of their father and the collision itself, as this trial appears to be going down a more personal note as opposed to a factual one. Lawyer Stephen Owens gave a bit of a mea culpa after lunch break and before continuing his cross-examination of Polly Sanderson Grasham, who was called to be a witness for her father, by saying, "I need to apologize, I was an ass earlier. It was wrong of me to triangulate you, your dad, your sister and your mum. I ask you for forgiveness." Earlier in the session, he had asked if Jenny, the one who refused to appear, was a liar. Polly had been speaking and testifying that her dad had only become angry and hot-tempered after the accident, and that the lawyer in turn had tried to draw a line between that claim and Jenny's claim of abuse. I did see an article around the same time of this using Gwyneth Paltrow to raise a certain point, and that concerns that ski slopes have become a legal minefield, because it turns out more and more people as time have gone by become increasingly bitch-made. Any excuse to make a pretty penny, am I right? Of course, each case is individual and we should base it on that and that alone, but the prevalence for any excuse to sue someone does increase when opportunities arise. This is one of those times where some argue that is what the case is. A final point raised by Gwyneth Paltrow's defense when interrogating Polly was that, and she agreed, her father enjoyed being in the spotlight before the collision, this being used as a way of explaining that he actually is famous and enjoying this attention after the incident. It was also noted at this point, it was highly likely Gwyneth Paltrow's husband, son and daughter were likely to testify during the remainder of the trial at some point. We've yet to get to Gwyneth yet, and some of that was quite chuckle-worthy. We'll get to it soon. On to day 4! We'll start with the trending tag again, Lady Di. Gwyneth Paltrow's resting bitch face as Craig Ramone describes her taking out Sanderson, the expert skier as he was described in day 1 by Craig Ramone, on the bandana beginner slope. I assume there's a point here where some warm up on beginner slopes before going to the more advanced. Not entirely sure. although we'll admit on the face of it with no knowledge, it is an amusing take. On Friday, Gwyneth Paltrow took the stand. This was arguably the biggest moment of the trial, a chance for her to really cement what was going on from her perspective. Quote, "I was skiing, and 2 skis came between my skis, forcing my legs apart. And then there was a body pressing against me, and there was a very strange grunting noise, so my brain was trying to make sense of what was happening. I froze when he slipped between my skis. I absolutely froze. I was confused at first, and I didn't know exactly what was happening. It's a very strange thing to happen on the ski slope," indicating that once they fell, they were almost spooning, and that she had moved away quickly because she didn't want to be touched. You know, the "stop touching me" kind of perspective, attitude, mentality, yeah, that. One of the attorneys representing Sanderson questioned Paltrow for nearly 2 hours. At one point, she had asked if Gwyneth Paltrow could demonstrate the crash with her in the courtroom. The judge declined this request. Instead, Kristen walked around the courtroom trying to reenact where the skis were and how Paltrow and Sanderson were positioned based on how Gwyneth Paltrow described the incident. Kristen then asked Gwyneth Paltrow whether the actress had been present when paperwork about the crash was filled out, with her admitting she was not, but her instructor stayed with Sanderson to make sure he was okay. Later on, Gwyneth Paltrow had said that she stayed on the mountain long enough for him to say that he was okay and to stand up, saying it was absolutely not a hit and run. The attorney then pressed Paltrow more than once about whether the actress had taught information about Sanderson's medical condition following the crash, with Paltrow testifying, "I think you have to keep in mind when you're a victim of a crash, right, your psychology is not necessarily thinking about the person who perpetrated it," and that she did not ask anyone at the resort because at the time, "I did not know he had sustained injuries like that. I thought it was very minor on the day." She maintained that Terry Sanderson had crashed into her and she did not cause the crash, quoted as saying, "Mr. Sanderson categorically hit me on that ski slope, and that is the truth. I feel sorry for him. It seems like he's had a difficult life, but I did not cause the accident, so I cannot be at fault for anything that subsequently happened to him." One article I'd noticed by the Washington Post pointed out that Gwyneth Paltrow is dressing for where she'd rather be, every day wearing something very fancy, very different. Not that it matters in the slightest here, the trial is vastly more important. Oh, and just to demonstrate the severity of this trial, I'm going to play a short clip, just a clip, just to see how well this was handled.
May I ask how tall you are?
I'm just under 5'10".
Okay, I am so jealous.
I think I'm shrinking though.
You and me both. I have to wear 4-inch heels just to make it to 5'5".
Well,
so
they're very nice.
Well, thank you.
The last thing for the first week of the trial that we should quickly address is that Gwyneth Paltrow genuinely thought, for a brief moment, because she was afraid of this, that what had happened to her was that she was about to be sexually assaulted. So on to week 2, day 5. How exciting. On the 27th of March 2023, Terry Sanderson took the stand. We'll go to the trending tag first, Gwyneth Paltrow ski crash trial. Hashtag Gwyneth Paltrow's face when Terry is recalling how the accident happened sums up exactly how I'm feeling about this testimony. And how was this dude thinking so much if he was unconscious face down in the snow? I don't buy it, total money grab. Terry Sanderson started by saying that he was skiing on the right side of the slope, and said that someone who was familiar with the resort told members of the meetup group, "Whatever you do, do not go down the middle of the run," noting it would be crowded, so he decided to veer towards the right of Bandana Run. In his testimony, he recounted the moment of the 2016 crash. He explained he was skiing down Bandana Run when he saw 2 4x8 signs telling him to slow down, so he figured there must be lots of merging trails down there. He said, "There is nothing in front of me. I just remember everything was great, and then there was a blood-curdling scream, and then boom, I'm absolutely flying. All I saw was a whole lot of snow." He said in the aftermath of the crash, everything was black. And the first thing he remembers is that there was someone who was really mad at him. "I couldn't move my head, I couldn't move my body." Sanderson then said that when Ramon asked him, Ramon being Craig Ramon, if he remembered his name, he thought he was able to remember. Craig Ramon had previously testified it took several moments for Sanderson to be able to remember his name. Adding an email address he sent to his 3 daughters in the aftermath of the crash, Terry Sanderson said he was only trying to add levity to a serious situation when he said, "I'm famous." He said one of the first thoughts following the crash was, "I've got to let my kids know I'm okay." He was questioned about his speech pattern, and he said one of the symptoms he noticed in the aftermath of the crash was that he focuses on details when talking before he can get to the main point. Everything is backwards, upside down, and backwards. And that he is no longer as engaged in activities the way he was prior to the crash. He has a much wider range of temperament than he had before. Something's changed, I don't know being the quote. He continued by saying there are at least 12,000 to 15,000 things to do on my to-do list that he can no longer get done. It's now just continuous things that I can't do. And the reason he brought this case was to prove the truth with facts, and that he swears he did not plow into the actress. From the tweets I mentioned in the trending tag for this day, people question his umming and ahhing, his speech pattern. In cross-examination, Gwyneth Paltrow's lawyer questioned him about his previous stating, "I wrote, I'm famous because it's cool that I had a collision with a celebrity. That was your thinking at the time, do you deny it?" He replied, "Not if you have it on record. I don't doubt you, I misspeak a lot." The lawyer also mentioned a discrepancy in the amount of time Sanderson said he was unconscious after the collision. He replied, "I really had no idea and I was trying to answer. I sometimes make a mistake." He also said that no one had helped him after the crash. No one had checked in on his well-being. No one had stopped. No one had assisted. After a lunch break, Eric Christensen, Gwyneth Paltrow's ski instructor and a ski instructor for over 40 years, took the stand and made it quite clear no one was unconscious following the collision. Also, the attorneys played an animated interpretation of what had happened that day. On to day 6. 3 to go, folks. 3 to go. On day 6, one of the main cruxes of an argument was how the retired doctor suing Gwyneth Paltrow was claiming to be concussed on one hand while at the same time, not long after the accident, boozing quite heavily. It was also presented to the court that Sanderson did a psychological evaluation and he scored quite high on narcissism and may lack empathy. She also said that other scales proved he was likely to be overreactive and explosive, quoted as saying he's someone that likes attention and needs approval. Those words came from Angela Eastvold, a neuropsychologist who testified on the 6th day. On the same day, it was posited that Terry Sanderson had actually had the concussion and brain-related injuries prior to the accident itself, with some speculating that he had dementia and that he was never diagnosed with it officially because doctors were so focused on the effects of the 2016 crash and how that affected his brain, basically. O.J. Simpson, one of the most credible sources on the planet for evading crimes, spoke up on this, gave his 2 cents, and backs Gwyneth Paltrow because he himself had suffered a similar skiing wipeout on the same run at Deer Valley. Gwyneth Paltrow's lawyers also argued that the reason that Mr. Sanderson had actually deleted a GoPro video at the collision, which would have helped the whole situation, was because it would unequivocally disprove his claims that Gwyneth Paltrow rammed into him. This rumoured footage was mentioned by his daughter after he emailed her a link to the ski discussion forum on the Meetup website. A tech managed though to break into the files itself because the link given to others was faulty, and it showed a number of exchanges between Mr. Sanderson and witness Craig Ramone. They kept repeating, "It's the most important piece of evidence," and they couldn't figure it out. They just didn't know how to open the link. Honestly, it's comical how easy it was. I can't believe they didn't do this already. It's almost a joke. It was just common sense. This from tech investigator Michael Fletcher. In case you haven't worked out yet, this is not looking very good for Colonel Terry Sanders. And I keep calling him that because to me he looks like the KFC guy, alright? On to day 7. On day 7, desperate times called for desperate measures for Terry Sanderson. He continued his testimony. This is the last day of the actual trial part before the verdict on day 8. Quoted as saying, "I guess like what is going on here, this is obviously an issue that someone needs to be accountable for. And if they're never accountable, what are they going to do? They're going to do it again. Now we have the molesting of young children on an island." He compared this to Jeffrey Epstein, okay? The judge then told the jury to disregard those words. In closing arguments, Terry Sanderson's attorney said, "One of the most significant pieces of evidence here is a sudden and precipitous change in Terry Sanderson. Terry has a problem. It's an invisible injury. You see someone with brain injury and they look fine. What's wrong with him? The 4 broken ribs. Those are painful for maybe 3 months or so. But the brain injury has persisted to this day and will last until he dies." Adding, "It's permanent. Your personality changes permanently, and you lose everybody who knows you. This case is not about celebrity, it's about a man's life." Gwyneth Paltrow's attorneys said that this was a hit and run that took no small amount of work. Gwyneth's family lost half a day of bonding, and even more because now everyone's stressed. He's 76. I mean, my parents, they were dead by then. They certainly weren't taking 10 trips around the world. so we have to look at that, referencing his old age. Continuing, he hit her, and he's not entitled to sue her. He's entitled to be here today, but he's not entitled to be rewarded for hurting her. That's not how this country works. Claiming that his claims were meritless. You don't throw a $3 million bombshell in the courtroom, call her King Kong, and walk away. Something I mentioned a few days ago within this trial was that Gwyneth's children were meant to take the stand, scheduled to anyway. As a little preemptive update before we get to the final day of the deliberations and the verdict, which will be quite short, they did not take the stand in the trial. It was deemed unnecessary. Move on. Final day, everyone, and the verdict of this. Day 8. After only 2 hours of deliberation, a Utah jury unanimously decided that it was Gwyneth Paltrow who got slammed into by the retired optometrist on the slopes of the Deer Valley Resort more than 7 years ago. The verdict is a blow for Terry Sanderson, who filed the lawsuit. It is vindication for Gwyneth Paltrow, who countersued for $1 plus legal fees, saying he was to blame for the collision. The costs for her legal fees will be decided at a later date. When she left the court, she told Sanderson, "I wish you well." In an email statement, she said, "I felt that acquiescing to a false claim compromised my integrity. I am pleased with the outcome and I appreciate all of the hard work of Judge Holmberg and the jury, and thank them for their thoughtfulness in handling this case." What really swung it for them was that for the defense, they brought out a lot of science to support her claims that he crashed into her. What really hampered Terry Sanderson was the GoPro footage was missing, compromised, and only select parts of it were found. That and the claims of brain damage being used as an excuse for why he could not remember things. At the age of 76, with also the addition that maybe he has dementia, which they managed to show white matter issues in his brain during the trial, he was a compromised testimony from the offset. LA entertainment attorney Trey Lavelle commented that the verdict that Paltrow had not only won the legal fight but improved her image. Quoted as saying, "The jury found Gwyneth Paltrow's version of events more credible, which was most likely because Paltrow and the experts testifying on her behalf gave a more detailed and compelling presentation. Paltrow's charm and personal magnetism didn't hurt either. The verdict just supports the long-standing trend of celebrities getting a bit of deference from jurors in civil trials, even in a place like Utah, where conservatism and religious faith run strong. Overall, she walks away from this trial with her image more than intact. It's actually been enhanced because of how she handled herself with poise. Beyond a few incredulous looks, she gave away very little. The patronizing resting bitch face thing, that was only very sort of isolated moments from what I saw on the Law and Crime YouTube channel. Yeah, I watched it, okay? I was curious to see if it would bang anywhere near as much as the Amber Heard Johnny Depp stuff. I was wrong, okay? It wasn't anywhere near as interesting until Terry Sanderson took the stand. You may have noticed I'm not giving much in the way of a personal opinion on this trial, beyond slight digs here and there. It's because I don't need to. I don't want to either. I just want you to know what happened as it happened. There were some sly digs I removed, because I thought it right to remove the more pathetic in favor of just sticking to what I believe would be a better timeline of events. I don't need to sensationalize, I don't get enough views even if I do. Thanks for listening though, everyone. Don't forget to smash the like if you made it this far, and share it. This one's a long one.